Everyone, and welcome to this first meeting for NOW-fertility Connect. This meeting, what we'll be doing, we'll having a group of distinguished experts in fertility, treatment, and coaching patients, and we're glad here to meet today to answer questions that are raised by our patients or anybody interested in fertility. And just to start quickly so that we don't lose much time, we will start introducing ourselves. First, I'll start myself. I am Tony. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at NOW-fertility, and I leave it to the rest of the group to start introducing themselves. I see Ian. So go ahead, please.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me along. My name's Ian Stones. I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Test Him. We are on a mission to make sure that men are properly supported around their fertility journey, as they are often the neglected part of the equation. So that's us. I'll keep it very brief. There's a lot of us to chat.
Okay, Mel.
Hi, I am Mel Johnson. I am the founder of The Stork and I, which is a coaching community for people who are considering solo parenthood. Thank you.
Claire.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, and good night. My name is Claire Innes, and I'm the founder of The Fertility Mentor. So I'm a fertility nutritionist specialising in improving egg quality in women over 35 through nutrition, hormone balance, and lifestyle factors.
Okay, so next, Luciano.
Hello, everyone. I'm Luciano Nardo. I'm the founder of NOW-fertility and consultant in reproductive medicine and infertility, both NOW-fertility and Orchid Fertility Clinic in Dubai.
Okay, Tina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Tina Padia, founder of Tina Fertility Coach. I'm based here in Singapore, but I support women globally, and I am supporting them emotionally through this journey. So I am a life coach, fertility coach, and a master NLP practitioner.
Cassie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Destino. I am the founder of a group called IVF Support UAE. I am based here in Dubai, and I help women navigating the fertility space here in the United Arab Emirates. I'm also a certified fertility doula.
Okay, did I miss anybody? I don't think so.
I haven't said hello yet.
Okay.
Julia.
Julia, yes, you, Julia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Young. I'm a registered nutritional therapist specializing in fertility. I work with couples and individuals, supporting them on their fertility journey. I work across all areas of fertility, and my clinic is called Julia Young Nutrition.
Okay, so nice having you all with us today. The way we're going to go through this is already we have received some questions from some patients. So we'll be starting with this. And if there's anybody attending, any patients, anybody interested in any question, please go ahead. You can ask us any question through the chat, and we'll take care of that. So there's no problem. So let me start first with the first question. And I think this is Dr. Luciano can answer this question. I'm 35 years old. What is the approximate range for the average number of embryos available per egg retrieval cycle, usable embryos for this age group?
It is a difficult question to answer because the number of eggs harvested and the quality of eggs is not just dependent on chronological age, but also on ovarian reserve. And we know that age is an important factor, but certainly it's not the only one. And other cofactors may be acquired or may be inherited, could impact on the quality of eggs. The second thing to say is that the number of embryos doesn't depend only on the number of eggs, but there is a 50% contribution coming from the sperm. So it is difficult for me to say, based on chronological age, only how many eggs you should have harvested at any one time to create a good number of embryos. However, based on data in the literature and based on my own clinical experience, provided there is a sufficient, adequate, normal ovarian function, women of the age of 35 probably will have between 10 to 12 mature eggs harvested at any one time. The blastocyst formation rate is about 1 in 3. So if you were to have 12 eggs harvested, probably you could account to have 3 blastocysts on average. And we know that women of the age of 35 probably have about 35–40% of aneuploid embryos. So out of 3, you may have the best for the 2 euploid blastocysts suitable for transfer.
Yeah, in relation to this question, there is another question which says, in case of using your own eggs, is it recommended to use an embryo bank to accumulate blastocysts through multiple egg retrievals and then perform PGTA? This is related, as you said, to the number of eggs that we might get depending on the age and the ovarian reserves and ultimately the blastulation rate. So what's your recommendation on that?
IVF is certainly not a guarantee to pregnancy, and it's also not a guarantee to embryo. It's just enhancing the individual chances to achieve a successful pregnancy. But after all, the process of ovarian stimulation leading to a collection and thereafter is a numbers game. So more eggs inevitably means more embryos. More embryos means more chances to have a euploid embryo to be transferred once the embryos are tested. So embryo banking is an option. It's an option especially for women with suboptimal ovarian reserve or with those that are cryopreserving embryos for medical reasons, whether that is pre-surgery or in preparation of cancer therapy, or indeed in some cases just as a social indication. Embryo banking, however, has to take into account of 2 factors. One is the number of cycles patients may be undergoing without knowing whether they will be using the created embryos. So that probably is an ethical issue. And the second one is a clinical question. Yeah, I ask myself very often is, do women need to be exposed to continuous repeated ovarian stimulation cycle just to harvest eggs? And probably there's no straight answer to both questions, but my recommendation would be that if you were to undergo controlled ovarian stimulation and out of each cycle you have 3 good quality blastocysts, you probably would be fine undergoing 2 cycles, accumulating a total of 6 blastocysts. That probably, depending on your chronological age, certainly, but generally will give you at least 3 euploid embryos at the stage of blastocyst suitable for a transfer.
So what about PGTA? Would you recommend doing PGTA for some patients who do accumulate or collect embryos, hoping to find at least one euploid embryo?
PGTA is not the solution to failed IVF cycle, but certainly is going to help the odds of successful outcome. We know that the number of aneuploid embryos increases with chronological age, and also that aneuploid embryos lead to miscarriage. Therefore, my recommendation is that if there are multiple embryos to be cryopreserved, perhaps it makes sense to PGTA in order to know which embryo to use first out of a multiple number of embryos. In women of advanced maternal age and after the age of 39, PGTA may help to screen the embryos, choose the healthy embryo that can be transferred to the uterus first, hence reducing the risk of miscarriage. And third, transferring an euploid embryo will shorten the time to pregnancy. But it is also important to state that at this point in time, there is no absolute certainty that transferring a mosaic or even an aneuploid embryo will definitely not result in a pregnancy. So I think the information we have has to be tailored, and clinical advice has to be taken into consideration when patients make a decision whether using PGTA.
Okay. Um, so this third question is a patient, she's having IVF via NHS, and her first IVF resulted in failed transfer. And the second one didn't result in any viable eggs. So the clinic is suggesting to use the same protocol, same treatment for the third cycle. And she's worried about this. And she's asking, is there anything that should be done? Should there be a change in the protocol? Should be another test to be suggested at this stage before she goes into the next IVF cycle?
It is very important to understand why the treatment cycle failed, whether it was down to number of eggs, quality of embryos, endometrial performance. There's no a straight answer. It may be that actually the stimulation was absolutely fine and the embryo transfer was successfully performed. Perhaps there are some other underlying issues that may be investigated. Undergoing one embryo transfer and not having a successful outcome is unfortunately normal. As I said earlier, IVF is not guaranteed to pregnancy. IVF is going to enhance the individual chances to achieve a successful pregnancy. I would not be against using the same stimulation protocol if there was an adequate ovarian response, if there was a good maturation rate of the eggs, if there was a good fertilization rate and a good blastocyst formation rate. Of course, if the stimulation was not adequate, if the number of harvested eggs was not as expected, or the maturation rate of the eggs was not good, or fertilization, then yes, we may consider changing the stimulation plan.
Yeah, I agree totally. We know that in patients who have repeated failures in IVF, there's a lot of pressure on both the patient and the physician. And many times they ask for some changes to take place, hoping that these changes might be of value to them and improve their chances in the next IVF cycle.
You're muted, Tony. Tony, you're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I have two questions now for Julia. The first one is, I've been taking prenatal vitamins while trying to conceive. Is that usually enough, or should I be thinking about other supplements too?
Sure. So I'd say prenatal is a really good starting point, and it's going to give you a lot of the essential nutrients that you need. But I usually, in practice in my clinic, I usually would add in a few other targeted supplements depending on the client's needs. So, for example, an omega-3 fish oil can be really helpful in terms of reducing inflammation in the body. It can support hormonal balance and may aid implantation as well. And there's evidence it can help with sperm quality as well as egg quality. So it's a good one to add in, especially if you're someone that doesn't eat a lot of fish in the diet or that sort of thing. CoQ10, there's lots of research around how CoQ10 or ubiquinol can help in supporting both egg and sperm health. Eggs and sperm need lots of energy for cell replication. So CoQ10 can provide that energy, and we can't really get it for enough from food and the diet. And also it can protect the cells from oxidative stress. So it's an antioxidant. So it can be a really helpful one, especially for our slightly older patients. CoQ10 can be a useful one to take. And then there could be other nutrients. So sometimes we need to supplement with additional iron or zinc or specific B vitamins. So it depends on the patient and what their needs are. So often testing can be helpful to find out where they might be low in terms of nutrient levels. Vitamin D is often needed, so we often put that in. But I think it's important to note also that taking more is not always better. So I get an awful lot of people that come to me and they're taking a long list of supplements. They may have done their research online. They may have read a certain book that says you should take all of this to support your cycle. And sometimes more, just taking less is actually better. And our liver has to process all the supplements we take. So actually taking a bit more of a targeted approach, making sure they're good quality and the right supplements for you can be better than just sort of taking everything that you've read about. And it can be very expensive as well if you take sort of every supplement out there. But definitely they can play a role, and a few additional ones can be helpful for sure.
Yeah, recently there have been talks about the role of mitochondria, especially in women above the age of 35, and the impact of aging mitochondria on the quality of the eggs. What do you think about the supplements that support mitochondrial functions like NMN or other supplements?
Yeah, I think there's some good research out there for them, and it's something I'm starting to use in my clinic. So yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I was at the ESHRE conference back in last year, yeah, back in Paris, and they were certainly started talking quite a lot about NMN in the research there and in the papers. So I think it's definitely one to consider again for both men and women. We just have to be careful how much we're giving people, especially if they're on an IVF protocol as well. But there's a lot more talk about mitochondrial health now being one of the main things we need to focus on for sure.
Yeah, one more question.
Tony,
Yeah.
sorry, allow me to say something on this about this actually. Just some facts for our audience and all colleagues. I was quite surprised some months ago. I was doing some research about the mitochondrial numbers in most organs in our body. And I would like just to share that I was while researching about the difference between different organs, I discovered that actually the eggs, as egg cells, are the cells in the women's body with the highest number of mitochondria. The number of mitochondria per egg cell is around between 250 and 600,000.
Oh.
Okay. The number of mitochondria in the cardiomyocyte, that are the heart cells, is between 2 and 5,000. So you can see the significant difference and how much more energy the eggs need for the process of fertilization, for the process of embryo division, from the very, very beginning. So what we know to be ATP, or the normal energy that the cells acquire, depends very much on the mitochondrial health and the mitochondrial numbers. So when I now discuss with patients that the heart cells have between 2 and 5,000 mitochondria, and the egg cells have between 250 and 600,000 mitochondria, they will understand why sometimes eggs are not mature, sometimes eggs don't fertilize, sometimes eggs in chronologically older women don't become embryos.
Yeah, this is really quite interesting. I think the future will bring a lot of information related to this.
Can I jump in as well? Because this is one of my favourite topics on the channel. There's a brilliant study by, I think it's Dr. Yakov Bentov, talking about the use of kind of like energizing mitochondria, particularly with the use of things like CoQ10. And he talks about how his belief is that it's not the fact that eggs are older that are particularly the problem. It's that they don't have the energy to produce that ATP. So it's not necessarily age. Older eggs are less likely to be able to produce the energy, but finding a way around that, it looks like it's going to be a really, really interesting opportunity.
Yeah, interesting. One more question to Julia. What are the most important nutrients or foods I should focus on right now ahead of my IVF cycle?
Sure. So there's loads of things that we can add in, and that's, it's really important to focus on what you can add in rather than what you should be taking away. We all know the foods that are less helpful, but adding in foods is a really good strategy to have. So protein to start off with, making sure we're getting enough protein in the diet, and I think a lot of people don't get enough. So when we're talking about protein, it's things like eggs, fish, poultry, our plant proteins as well. And they're really important for supporting hormone balance, for egg and sperm quality, general growth and repair, and feeling full up as well, which is important, just to keep us satisfied with our meals. And then healthy fats. And again, even though we're moving away from this kind of low fat craze that went on for many, many years, I think people are still scared about fats and how much fat they should be eating. But it's important we get healthy fats in the diet. And that's in the form of things like avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil, fatty fish, things like that. And again, really important for hormone balance, for reducing inflammation in the body, and again, supporting implantation. So make sure you're getting the healthy fats. Eating a rainbow, bit of a cliche, but lots of colourful fruit and vegetables in the diet. Making sure we're getting variety in there to support our gut microbiome. And these are all, these colourful fruits and veg are really rich in antioxidants. So again, helping to reduce oxidative stress in the body and protect those eggs and sperm cells. Whole grains and fibre as well, really important. So helping to keep our blood sugars nice and stable, and supporting our gut health and for general energy as well. We talked about energy, really important. And then things like iron-rich foods, especially often women, a lot of the women that I work with can be low in iron, so making sure they're getting plenty of iron-rich foods in the diet. Again, if you're following a certain diet, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you may struggle a bit here, but lean meats, plant proteins, legumes, leafy greens, all really important for implantation and supporting early pregnancy as well. And then all the lifestyle factors come with it as well, making sure you're getting plenty of good quality sleep and reducing stress, and staying hydrated, all really important as well. So there's lots that we can do in preparation.
So what's your impression about the new food pyramid?
Yeah, interesting. I think there's been so much, hasn't it, on like Instagram and people giving their opinions, and I think it's a step in the right direction. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I guess in the UK we could learn from that in terms of reducing the ultra processed foods and the sugar. There's a lot of focus on protein, which is important. So people have picked at it, and I think going from the standard American diet moving to this model is improvement, and I think we should kind of focus on that. I think there's some positives. We can always find negatives to it as well, but I think increasing the proteins, increasing the fiber, and less of the sugar. I think there was no place really for sugar and ultra processed foods in there, which is important, whereas I think the old version sort of allowed that sort of thing. So it's a step in the right direction. How it kind of, what goes from there, it'll be interesting to see, but it's hopefully some progress.
Yeah. Let's move forward to some male infertility. There is a question about sperm DNA fragmentation. Can we do anything to improve it? I think Ian can answer that. Can you start, please, by explaining to us what is DNA fragmentation first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So when we're talking about sperm DNA fragmentation, what we're talking about is the fact that the sperm really have got one job, and that is to carry a package of DNA to go and meet that egg and deliver that DNA into the egg. It breaks in half, you get half from the egg, half from the sperm, and that's what makes a healthy embryo. What we know with sperm, semen analysis really only looks at some of the kind of broad kind of overviews. Semen analysis tells us how many sperm we've got. It tells us how well they're moving, and it gives us an idea of their shape and how many are the right shape. It doesn't give us any information about the DNA integrity in the head of that sperm. And what we know with sperm DNA fragmentation is what is happening is when a sperm is produced and made over a sort of 3 month period, that DNA has to go through a huge process of actually being opened up and split and then closed back up and packaged and squeezed right down into this really tight little package within the sperm head. And what can happen with that is elements of that double helix can become broken either in that packing process, or that DNA can be impacted during the kind of process, or whilst they're kind of maturing and lounging around in the epididymis waiting to be ejaculated. So DNA fragmentation talks about these breaks, and what we know is that it is correlated to embryo development and potentially miscarriage and failed IVF. There are many causes for sperm DNA fragmentation. And I think in answer to this question, can it be improved? Fundamentally, yes, but there is a caveat on that. I think what's really important is if a man has a sperm DNA fragmentation test and it comes back bad, I think what we really advocate for is that we try and get to the root cause of that sperm DNA fragmentation, because there are many different causes. Things like infection, maybe an imbalance in the semen microbiome, oxidative stress is a big impact that's already been mentioned today, and varicocele. So this is an enlarged vein within the scrotum that causes excessive heat around the testicles, and heat denatures the DNA and damages it. So really, when you are, if a guy is diagnosed with high DNA fragmentation, what we would strongly recommend is that that man goes to see a urologist with male fertility expertise who can then investigate all of these other potential causes. Julia's talked a lot about lifestyle and diet and the importance of all these nutrients. All of these, are also equally valid for men, because actually, if we improve the environment that these sperm are maturing in, and we can reduce the oxidative stress, that may help improve sperm DNA fragmentation as well. I think the only caveat is there's some sort of more research and interest coming in around double strand DNA fragmentation breaks, and this potentially has more of a genetic factor. So this is more to do with that packing of the DNA into the sperm, and where that's going on, there may that this is where lifestyle and diet impact, it may not have as much of an impact. But I think really what's very, very important is that a man is properly supported on that result, and then all of these things are discovered, are investigated and potentially treated. Then, when you've done all those interventions, you can see if the DNA fragmentation has improved. If it hasn't, then we perhaps look at what can be done in the lab, whether it's an ICSI cycle, whether it's a sperm separation device that may also help in terms of filtering out sort of damaged sperm.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting topic anyway. I have a question, probably Ian and Claire can answer that, related to what I've been discussing, nutrition and sperm issues. The question is, how long before nutrition changes impact fertility, and when should we retest semen parameters?
Shall I go first, Ian?
Go for it, Claire. Go on.
Yep.
I've had my first bit. You go for it.
Woohoo! So it's an excellent question. So initially we're talking days. Is it like anything else here? There's different stages. So literally within the first few days of getting your protein and your fats right, exactly as Julia explained, your blood sugar will begin to settle. Insulin stops spiking, and this is your first win, because a stable body is the first requirement for a stable pregnancy. Next, we're looking at a couple of weeks. So by weeks 4 to 8, our gut should start to settle. So repairing gut health and systematic inflammation should start to go down. And this is the moment that your body can stop managing that constant internal stress, start prioritizing reproductive health. In the next cycle or two, the first cycle or two, this is where we're really building what I call the soil. So it takes about 1 or 2 cycles to really influence the quality and receptivity of our uterine lining, and ensuring that it's nutrient rich and ready for implantation. But the big one that I'm always battering on about is this 90-day window. So this is the time between kind of immature follicle to mature egg, and that's when that DNA separating happens, and that's when the eggs really need that energy, that mitochondria. So the egg that you ovulate today actually started its maturation 3 months ago, and you're quite literally feeding the egg that you'll be harvesting in April, May now. So 90 days can make an enormous difference to the kind of environment. I can be quite clinical and call it like the soil, but the soil that's going to hold and carry the baby. And of course, the egg that is hopefully going to become a lovely little embryo and a healthy little baby.
And I think, yeah, following on
Do you
from
agree,
that,
Ian?
yeah, absolutely. And actually, that you've talked about there the soil and the environment for the egg, and it's exactly the same for the sperm. So we know the maturation cycle for sperm is about 72 to 90 days. So you're talking that same kind of window that Claire's just talked about. And so for men, what you ejaculate today is what you've been, working on for the last 3 months, and it will be reflective of your health, from back then. So, if you've had COVID, if you've had flu, if you went on a horrendous stag do to Prague for a long weekend and did whatever goes on a stag do, that will impact your sperm quality, but a little bit further down the line. And I think, this is really important for men to understand that it does take a little bit of time. But it's also then got to be a constant process. We're making thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of sperm, a day or a week, and they're constantly being bombarded, by this environment that we're creating for them. So we've got to make sure that environment is constantly good for them. And so it is really important. I think, one of the things I would say on that, although we're looking at 72 to 90 days, you will also get immediate effects from heat stress. If you're going and having hot baths or saunas or sitting for long periods of time, that will have quite an immediate effect on sperm health. So then the second part of the question was, okay, well, when should we retest semen parameters? We would look at a minimum of 3 months. That's assuming if you've done a test today and it's suboptimal and you make the immediate changes, 3 months down the line is really the first point where you'd want to do a test and see if things have improved. But of course, none of us can make those changes rapidly, and nor should we. We should kind of always build on these things progressively. So you might want to wait 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months if you could, and then see where you're at. I think the final piece to say to that, which is similar to the DNA frag story, is if you've made those changes and you've been really good and healthy and consistent with those, and you retest your semen and it's still bad or hasn't improved as much as you would hope, then it's time to go and see a male fertility specialist and look at all these other things like varicocele, like semen microbiome, like infection. Because if things haven't improved with the lifestyle and diet, then there may be something else going on as well.
Yeah. I have two important and challenging questions for our fertility coaches, Cassie, Claire, and Tina, where you can all try to answer and discuss the questions that I'm going to ask. The first one is, as fertility coach, do you work with both partners together or individually? And how do you support couples who cope differently? Probably Cassie can start.
Sure. I do like to work with both partners. I leave it to them, and obviously it's generally the female partner who reaches out to me in the first place, and I always encourage her to bring her partner. Now, in the UAE, we are always dealing with a female and a male. That is the law here. That is the way that it is. So I know that in other places there are other forms of couples, but here it is always, and they are always married. There is a husband and a wife. So for the sake of my work, I'm going to kind of frame it that way, with the understanding that it's not like that everywhere. But the wife usually reaches out to me, and I always encourage her to bring her partner because I want them both to understand. A big part of what I do is really lay out the process of fertility treatment and what can be expected. I've gone through it several times myself, so I like to bring my lived experience to it. I find that, often women are very focused on what can I do? What can I be? What medications? How are they going to feel? How is my mood going to be? What can I be eating? How should I be moving? Why hasn't this worked? And very often I find that the male partner says, "How can I fix this for her? What can I do that fixes it?" And so she can just be happy and have a baby, and we can sort of move on from this chapter in our lives as quickly as possible. That seems to be the vibe when I'm talking to couples. And so I try to kind of hold both of those things at the same time. And, I think it's vitally important for men to be as involved as they can possibly be, no matter what has brought them to needing fertility treatment in the first place, because you cannot do it without them. And I really think it's so great when they are very invested and really understand what their partners are going to go through and really show up for them. And I think, one of the things that I find to be quite challenging is when I have a couple, and this happens quite regularly, where the woman is ready to just do whatever it takes, and I will do this 10 times if we have to do it. And then the man says, I can't watch her go through that again. It was so painful. We had a loss, we had a miscarriage, we had a failed transfer, and she was so upset that I don't want her to do it again. And I can see that all she wants to do is do it again. So, I am not a psychologist. And there have been times where I have said, I think you might need to speak to someone who can guide you through this in a little bit more of sort of a professional way, because, the communication is so key. And, supporting both of them, meeting them both where they are, can be really challenging if they're on very different pages.
Yeah. What about you, Tina?
Yeah, very similar to what Cassie says. I work in Singapore, so I'm dealing with a lot of cultural complexities and different layers. So I predominantly work with women on the emotional side. So my focus is really supporting them emotionally and mentally through this, exhausting journey, traumatic journey. I've been through the journey myself here in Singapore, so I'm very familiar with everything and how it's run here. So generally women reach out to me, and that's because in an Asian culture, um men don't always want to open up and talk about this, especially a topic such as fertility, which is still very taboo here. Like, people don't talk about it, and I've been trying really hard to advocate so that more and more women, more and more couples talk about it, because it affects so many people. But it's just a cultural thing here. They don't want to talk about it for fear of judgment, shame, blame, guilt, fears of feeling guilty. So I do work predominantly with women, but what I do find, a lot of my work is around communication and communicating with your partner, expressing like what you're going through, understanding what you need from your partner, what your partner might need from you. So I often find that working, even if I'm working with women, it does help with the overall relationship. So even though I'm not coaching the couple, it does improve relationship, especially around talking about what's going on and being really open and honest. So that's kind of like, how I help and what I do. And I have actually coached some husbands in the past. It's been, a very, like, a handful. But I do find that, and also a lot of the women that I work with, they do as a couple go to couples counseling or therapy, because other things surface when you're on this journey, because you're under so much pressure, and there's so much uncertainty that other things from your past start to surface in your relationship. And so a lot of the women that I work with do say to me, oh, we are also seeing a counselor, a relationship counselor. So I always leave it to the experts, the relationship counseling, to them, and then I support the women through the emotional aspect. So yeah.
What about you, Claire? Do you have a different approach or experience?
Yes, I mean, we're all going to be slightly different. When I work with couples, my primary focus is very much always on her. And unlike Cassie, I'm based here in the UK, so I kind of proudly work with lesbian couples and women who are pursuing the path to parenthood on their own. But when as a woman and a couple that I'm working with, I like to be her kind of safe space. So that private, judgment-free space where she doesn't have to be the researcher and the project manager and the brave one. It's basically her hour in the week where she can vent about the frustrations, all of those spirals, him if she wants to, and she doesn't need to pretend everything's okay for fear that he's going to throw the towel in or say, I can't do this anymore. So while my kind of primary focus is always on her, I do give her tools to support him. So I know that for a lot of men, the idea of a fertility coach can feel like inviting someone else into the bedroom. It's the most private part of their relationship, and it's often, it's quite taboo, as Tina says. So often they're not particularly keen. And I work primarily with her. I mean, I choose to do that. That's what I want to do, but it's also it's best for her. I give her the data, the facts, and the steps that she can take at home. And that kind of gives her an out to stop feeling like the fertility police, if you know what I mean. And she just gets to go back to her partner with these suggestions. And sometimes it paints me as the bad guy, which I couldn't care less about because I want them to get the same outcome as they want. The door is always open for the men folk when it matters most. So I do invite the partners along if the woman wants them to come for the big conversations that relate to them. So things like sperm health, I'm always happy to look at partners' food diaries and stuff like that. And also intimacy. So to make sure that this process doesn't take the joy out of their connection and kill their sex life. So having that conversation. And normally by the time we talk about intimacy, the women and I have been working together for a few months. So that closeness and that trust is there. But it's about giving her, I see it anyway, about giving her the certainty that she needs to move forward while still making sure he knows his boundaries are respected and kind of protected in their relationship.
I think if I could just chip in from the male perspective on this one, this is a really interesting conversation, isn't it? How, as fertility coaches, mentors, nutritionists, it's a narrative we hear all the time that, the men don't necessarily show up as much. And it's a real shame because there's so much value available to men by seeing a fertility coach or a reflexologist or an acupuncturist or nutritionist. But unfortunately, the narrative for so long, for as long as fertility treatment has existed, is that it's all on the woman. And I think there's a huge need for us to change that narrative and say that this is a couple's thing, and the man has got an exactly equal responsibility in terms of his fertility health and the outcomes of the health of the pregnancy and that child as the woman has. And I think we really need to work on changing that narrative so that men do feel a bit more empowered to take positive action. Because actually, what we know from the support group that we run and have run for many, many years, is actually when you give men the right space and the right support, they will take action, they will feel empowered, and they will reach out and get advice and see the right consultants. And it makes a massive, massive difference. Like you're saying, Claire, it makes a difference in the bedroom. It makes a difference in terms of how they then show up for appointments. It makes a difference whether they take the supplements or if they change their diet. We've just got to make sure men are part of this conversation and encouraged to be part of the conversation. So I'll get off my soapbox, but
Whoa, clapping! Well done.
It's really
Well, I think
and the important thing, actually, I will just add is if we do this and get the men involved, it makes it so much better for the women, and it makes the outcomes better.
this discussion is going to lead us to one of the most important and common questions nowadays. And I think Mel is the expert to answer this question is what kind of support network do you recommend having in place before starting IVF as a solo parent?
So I think for me, what's important to say is you don't need to have a support network in place. And I think it's important to say that because some people panic and think, oh, I've not got enough support, so I can't do this. There are some people who do it with very limited support. However, you don't have to do it with limited support, and it can be a lot easier if you can get that support network in place. And so, what I always advise is to look at who can provide you the emotional support. And in some ways, that's easier because it can be remote, so you can see who in your network is there for you to talk things through with, and then who can provide you that practical support. So, is there anybody who needs to be in closer proximity to you that can provide some of those practical things? often when you're doing this solo, your friends and family know you as a very independent person who maybe doesn't ask for any help and support. And so, as Tina was saying, actually, communication is so key, because I think what really helps single women is to communicate to people that they're going into a different phase of their lives. And although potentially they've been known as a really strong, independent woman who doesn't need any help, actually that might change. And so keeping everybody in the loop and communicated to can be really critical. And then lastly, I would say through the support groups I run, one of the really great sources of help for solo mums is other solo mums. And so actually connecting with people who just immediately really get the nuances of doing this on your own can form really powerful friendships. And part of support networks. And so that's what I help people do, try to find other solo mums who are pregnant at the same time or who are trying to conceive at the same time. So you've got that support network of people who really understand your specifics.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have some time to go back to the channel to ask. We have a question from the audience, and one was sent to us. It's about donation. First, if using sperm donor, can we specify Asian or Chinese ancestry? What information can be provided usually? Photos, education, genetic testing. And another question also from the audience saying that how do we select usually eggs for donation? What are the criteria to be used? Can you give us a quick answer to these two questions?
Absolutely. So, first of all, the practice of using donor gametes is available only in some countries, and patients looking for the use of donor eggs and donor sperm have to be conversant with that approach, but maybe not in the country where they live, and they will need to travel overseas in order to access that service. The second point is about choosing the type of donor, whether it's a anonymous or non-anonymous donor, because in some countries the use of donation is only possible with a registered donor. Doesn't mean a known donor, maybe an unknown donor, but being registered with the regulatory body, such as, for instance, in the UK, with the Human Fertilization and Embryology Authority. So before going to choose the characteristics that form the phenotype of the donor, the prospective parent or parents have to bear in mind whether they're looking to use a anonymous or non-anonymous donor, and thereafter they have access to different options. Of course, in some countries, in some jurisdictions, it's possible to access information about the donor. In others, it's not. So even if he's an anonymous donor, for instance, like in Spain, however, the law in Spain says that the prospective parents cannot choose the donor. So they have no access to information about the donor. It's the clinic, and generally a clinician and a team that is different from the treating team that will choose the donor sperm or donor eggs for the recipient couple. In other countries, it is possible to choose the donor, or at least to be involved to some extent in the choice of the donor, and that can go from choosing the phenotypes or just genetic characteristics to more detailed information, such as education, hobbies, of course, genetic makeup of the donor as well. Most clinics, if using an egg bank or a sperm bank, will use donors that are fully screened to be compliant, donors that have full medical history, and in most cases also donors that have been genetically screened. And in that case also the partner that is going to use his or her own gamete is going to be screened as well. So the availability of donor material when it comes to IVF is a complex one, and something has to be discussed fully with the clinician, with the support team, in order to satisfy more criteria than just the phenotype and the ethnicity and the background history. I think goes into the details of some important questions that will be limited by jurisdictional constraints.
The final last question is about gender screening. Is it legal? And how is this recorded in the medical records and consent forms?
The use of pre-implantation genetic testing allows the testing of embryos also for the sex chromosome. So the PGTA enables the analysis of 22 pair of chromosomes plus the sex chromosome, X and Y. So it is possible to perform biopsies of blastocysts day 5 or day 6, and to test these blastocysts for the full chromosome panel plus the sex chromosomes. It is legal in some countries, such as in the UAE, in Saudi, in Egypt, and many other countries based in the Middle East, but not in Europe, not in North Africa. And the gender of the embryos is documented in the specific genetic report provided by the genetic lab. So it is legal to report the gender of the embryos. However, one, I think, important consideration that couples embarking on IVF with genetic testing for or including selection of blastocysts to transfer based on the gender is that once this information is made available, and once the remaining embryos are cryopreserved, say for instance in the UAE, if they wish to transfer the embryos at the stage of blastocysts to another country where the use of embryos that have been genetically tested and gender being detected is not allowed, they may obviously face that as a barrier. So they will not be able to transfer blastocysts that have been genetically tested to and the gender detected to another country. Or the way to transfer will be by providing the recipient clinic in the country where the embryo is going to be sent with a genetic report that covers, doesn't reveal the gender of the embryo. But PGTA for gender selection is certainly legal in some countries as part of IVF treatment to couples.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So we come to the end of this session. I have two announcements. The first one is this event will be a monthly event. We will be doing it every month, the last Wednesday of every month throughout 2026. And the second is NOW-fertility is offering a special consultation. Initial consultation will be deducted from treatment fees during the month of February. So for our patients, this is really quite good. I would like to, at the end, to thank the panelists. It has been really a very, very fascinating, informative session. I enjoyed the discussion and the questions and the answers, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you again next month.